Gotta get out of the office to see each other. How are you? Good, good. The turkey went out for Thanksgiving, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good morning, everybody. We're gonna get started. There may be just a couple more people, although most of the seats are taken, so people have to watch from the remote room after this. Thank you for coming here today for this panel discussion. My name is Doug Newman. I'm the Executive Director here at the Economic Alliance. I see an awful lot of familiar faces in the room, some that I haven't seen in quite a while, but nonetheless familiar faces. It's great to see everybody. For some of you that might be not as familiar with us, let me just do the 30-second version of the Economic Alliance commercial for a couple of you. We are a membership-based organization. About 1,200 businesses in the Cedar Rapids area are members of the Economic Alliance, including all of you in the room today. We do work in economic development, workforce development, community development, public policy, and business support. Really the whole gamut of things that can help businesses and help drive economic growth, and especially in these days, workforce development and workforce growth. That's what we do. We get involved in an awful lot of things. Some things like this panel discussion that raise interesting questions and create conversation and discussions on issues that many of you are facing. I think the popularity today, and by the way, I think you may have heard the voice as it started. We are going to record this as well. So we've got about 50 of you here today, and we expect maybe a lot of other people. So panelists say wise things, because there could be hundreds, maybe thousands of people watching on what you say today. But really, while we had some really successful virtual programs through COVID, through the pandemic, this is for an in-person meeting. It's great to see everybody back, and this is a really great turnout for this topic. I think there's a number of reasons probably for that. Maybe some of you missed me. I doubt that's actually true. James got the loudest laugh on that. Thank you. I appreciate that, buddy. I think interest in the topic, right? This is something that everybody is facing right now, and I think hearing the discussion today, some probing, some interesting questions on this really helps us all coalesce around a challenging topic, and one that keeps changing underneath our feet. Certainly, I want to give a quick shout out to Aaron Foley, who some of you may not know, relatively new on our staff. The popularity of the program might have a little bit to do with picking the right content and then doing a great job of promoting it as well. So Aaron, thanks for all of your work on that. And then my segue into introducing this panel is I certainly believe that the popularity and the great turnout today is also in large measure because of the people we have on the panel today. So thanks to all four of you for coming, for lending your wisdom, for lending your experiences to this topic. And I'm going to make brief introductions, and then I'll sit down and start asking questions. We'll jump right into it. At about 12:30, we are going to take some questions from the audience as well. Some of you submitted questions as you registered for the event, and a couple of those are already incorporated into things that I'm going to ask. But if you think of things, follow-up questions, additional questions that you want to ask, well, we will try to leave some room for that as well at the end of the panel. And then always in respect of your time, we'll make sure to wrap this up no later than 1 or even just before that. So let's start with introductions here. Jason Smith is the CEO at True North Companies. Cindy Lavelle is the area manager and local government and community affairs at ITC Holdings. Randy Ramlow is the Insurance, and Patrice Carroll is the CEO at Imon Communications. All of these folks are really thank you for your company's commitment and your personal commitment to the Economic Alliance and to the work that we do. All of these folks have committed time, talent, and treasure to the Economic Alliance, and I appreciate you being here once again today. No strangers to Economic Alliance programming, and we rely on you for many, many things. Thank you so much for being here today. So with that, I'm going to get this kicked off, and this doesn't, I think we kind of advertise it. This will be conversational. We've done the mayoral forums in the last month where we had this rigid timer and it kind of cut off at that second. We won't do this, but you know, Jason, if you go on too long, I might cut you off. But no direct time limits. But for starters, maybe just to lay the groundwork, and Jason, I'll start with you, but on some of these, anybody can jump in. But let's go through all four of you, just to kind of set the groundwork of where you are as a company in terms of in-office personnel, hybrid, working from home personnel, virtual, and maybe a little bit over the last, what now, 21 months, I think we'll be ticking into tomorrow, kind of where you've been. And just so people know as you answer other questions, oh, we're primarily remote, we're primarily in office, where you've been. So Jason, where is True North right now?
Great context. So True North, we have about 450 total people. We have brick and mortar all throughout Iowa. Two of our major offices are here headquartered in Cedar Rapids, as well as in West Des Moines. But we've got about 20 other smaller offices throughout the state. We also have brick and mortar in Denver, Dallas, and Chicago. And then we've got colleagues working from home in 23 other states. So we've got a pretty interested, distributed workforce throughout the country. As we sit today, there's about 40% of our workforce that's in facilities in some form or fashion, and the other 60% is working remote. About 10% of those colleagues, I should say about 20% of those colleagues are remote in general, because they're working from home in various capacities.
So ITC Midwest, that is our company based out of here in Cedar Rapids. We do, ITC Holdings is actually located in Michigan. So total, we probably have 700 employees with ITC, but just specifically talking about ITC Midwest, we have about 70 employees here in Iowa and southern Minnesota. And I would say, so all of our office personnel is currently working remote. We have been since March of 2020. Every time I say that, I think about when we were just going to be at home for a couple of weeks, and I just grabbed a couple of things from the office. So it's been a little bit longer, but I do want to make a point that our field crews, those building our transmission lines, have obviously been working and being very productive with safety protocols throughout this entire pandemic, and have never once worked remote. Makes for some good sidebar conversations when we do get out in the field with them, but office personnel have been working remote since March of 2020 and are set to go back.
Trace back to that field worker versus office employee, because there's a really interesting dynamic to consider there. So Randy.
Thanks. Well, thanks everyone for coming today. And I'll share experience, but not much wisdom. So you get both with me, probably not much wisdom. So UFG Insurance, we have offices in Princeton, New Jersey, New Orleans, Cedar Rapids is our home office, Denver, Houston, Sacramento, and Scottsdale. And March of 2020, we all went home, and we've had a few management people in the office, but even still today, most of our offices are all empty. Our Cedar Rapids one here, I would say, maybe 100, a little more than that. We're allowing people to come back if they have a need. In July, we were going to start bringing back 20% every month, and then the Delta variant kind of raised up, so we put that plan on hold, and most of those 20%, I think, kind of migrated back working remotely, and so we're probably going to start bringing people back in January, despite the Omicron, because I think these new variants are probably going to be the normal. We're going to have to find a way to deal with it. We were about 30% remote before the pandemic. So we have a lot of remote work already. Going forward, we probably only see about 10%, 5 days a week out of the office, and then the rest are kind of various levels of hybrid. So that's what we do.
And I'm on, we are local to Iowa. We have about 160 employees based mostly in Cedar Rapids. Also, we have some in Iowa City and in Dubuque. Where we have offices in all three towns. We have also a split workforce. About 55% of our employees work in trucks. They're in the field, either constructing fiber networks or they're installing customer servicing customers. And their jobs really didn't change other than we had additional safety protocols that we put in place to ensure their safety and our customer safety. And those are still in place. Our office team, about 45%, includes a customer care center as well as office. And we sent everybody home in March of 2020 for 2 weeks. Like everybody else. And pretty much stayed, with the exception of some groups that required specialized equipment. And we had significant safety protocols for those people that stayed in the office, and it was probably about 10%. This summer, we did open the office. We didn't make it mandatory to return, but anybody who wants to work from the office. And again, it varies by team. Some teams are in the office completely, the accounting department and finance, they're in the office 100% of the time. On any given day, I might see a whole engineering department there, but right now it's not mandatory. We've not set a date for everybody to come back because every time I've set a date, we postponed it, so my credibility is pretty low in that particular department.
I will say that we also invited ITC personnel to come back into the office on a voluntary basis this summer. I think we saw a few, what I would say, departments or groups coming in, and then once the Delta variant came and more protocols were put on back in the office, everybody migrated back home. But the invitation is still out there and open for folks to come back into the office.
And I would say that's true. When they made masks mandatory, then we saw fewer people come in.
Yeah, same thing at True North. You know, we were up in the 60 to 70% back in occupancy and really moving towards our permanent, what we call flexible work environments, hybrid model. And once the Delta variant took shape and we put masks back in, et cetera, we saw a lot of folks say, thanks, I'm going to go back working from home, which is somewhat interesting as we think about navigation going forward. What types of environments they want to be in and what they don't.
We'll let anybody jump in first on this, and we'll get everybody's thoughts on this. We'll come back to a couple of the things that you've already introduced, but I want to kind of ask a question that introduces the whole other side of this, which is really that got kicked off by COVID, but now doesn't have anything to do with COVID. It's the changing workforce, the changing workplaces, the Great Resignation. We keep seeing that term. We probably could have called this program the Great Resignation. The term describes a trend companies are experiencing due to employees wanting higher pay, better benefits, and more worker-friendly policies, and having options to leave for another job if you don't provide those, or in some cases, leave for retirement, or at least some time at home, right? Record numbers, massive numbers of people either moving between jobs or deciding not to be in the workforce at all right now. To what extent has your company experienced the Great Resignation? And how are you reacting to these new dynamics in the workforce and in the workplace? Sandy, go ahead.
All right, I'd like to start. We kind of were about where we were turnover wise last year to this year, so not a big effect. Lost a few more more, what I would call really good people this year. And having our home offices here, we, all my 30 years of being here, we have to make it a good place to be. Our model is try to get, sharp kids out of college, get them in the door, and hopefully they retire from us. And, we knew, they could always run off to the coasts or places with oceans, mountains, better climates. So we've always tried to make it a really good place to work, competitive in benefits and everything like that. So, part of that good company culture, I think, isolates us a little bit. We've been having a lot of conversations recently with, especially management, that, people don't tend to leave good bosses. They don't leave good coworkers. And so, be those things. We have to try to find a way to continue to perpetuate our culture, even when we're not seeing each other. We're really encouraging a lot of, one-on-one meetings, not just two claims adjusters, maybe talking about a claim, but have a one-on-one with, where you talk about, what's going on at home, what's your, work-life balance. And we really do mean that. We lost some people to other insurance companies that I know are kind of sweatshops. And they're probably going to get 20% more pay, but they're also going to get 20% probably more hours as well. So we're very aware of it. We try not to use the word great resignation. We're kind of calling it the great opportunity because we've also really recruited some really good people who didn't necessarily have to move to Cedar Rapids, which is sad for Cedar Rapids. We filled some really good jobs because we were allowing people to stay where they were. Or one individual that was in Manhattan. He didn't want to live in Manhattan, but didn't want to go all the way to Cedar Rapids either. So he moved somewhere in between. Manhattan, Boston, but I wish he could be here in Cedar Rapids. But not going to happen. So we are seeing it, but not what I would call a crisis yet.
I want to circle back to that remote worker question in a little bit. Is the resignation, have you guys experienced it, and how are you reacting?
We, like Randy, our turnover rate is about what we saw in 2018, 2019. It hasn't been significant. It was a little lower in 2020 than it is right now, but we haven't really experienced a lot of loss. We're in a growth mode. So we've hired 35 people this year. We've actually grown our team by about 25 because we're in a growth mode. What we have experienced is what I call COVID casualties, in that we are also very culture focused. We are very family oriented. So people create an environment where people feel like they belong to a family. They have strong support between their colleagues. They have strong support from the management. We do a lot of fun things, and it has stretched our creativity over the last 20 months, but we've continued to do those things. But what we have seen is the stress of working in isolation or remote. I mean, some of the positions, they are stressful, and the support of your colleagues makes it more manageable. And so we ended up losing people because of performance. They were not able to actually perform. To work remote, you have to be able to self-lead, in regardless of what position you have. And we have found that there were some employees that were unable to do that. So we lost employees, we terminated employees that performed well in the office, but could not perform at home in isolation, even though the job could handle. And that's probably been a bigger issue for us than, losing people to other jobs. And we've had, like I said, we've grown our staff by 20, 25 people this year. So we are able to find good team members.
Jason, what about you? Not only the question on turnover, but also these seemingly demands for better pay, better benefits, different workplace conditions.
I'm big on focus on what is within your control and what you can impact, and don't get caught up in what you can't. I'm also a Hawkeye fan, and I lead by the mantra of 10-2, and interestingly enough, we're 10-2 this season. And the point that I make in that with our colleagues is it's a 12-game season. Don't set yourself up for expecting to go 12-0, because a 10-2 season is probably going to get you in a championship. And if you do happen to go 12-0, that's awesome. And so the point is that as we approach this, the first prong is what's within our control. Who are we? What are we about as an organization, as a culture? What's the right fit profile of colleague that we're looking for? Where can we continue to make investments in our environments, in our benefits? We have a benefits modernization strategy. So all of those pieces and parts. But then, Doug, to your question, I can think of a great example of a talented young lady that was at True North. Randy, to your point, relatively new out of college. We try to keep them as a destination employer. She moved to Phoenix through the whole COVID situation, and third party came in and literally offered her 50% more pay. And that's one of those where it's like, we're not gonna win that battle. And so you have to just call it what it is and say, we went 10-2. And we let her go, bowed out gracefully and said, we aren't going anywhere. You know who we are, what we're about. And if this doesn't work out for you, keep in touch. So taking the high road to a certain extent on some of those, and that's the exception for us, because we are so invested in our people and our culture. And that is something that we can't control.
So I would say we've not necessarily seen a great resignation. I will say retirements have hit us. I personally, even as an employee at ITC, not making any of the hiring decisions, it has been very significant, our retirements. And we're losing a lot of knowledge that has been in our company for many, many years. And that has now, I think, been the big topic of conversation for us. So not necessarily the great resignation from just employees filtering out, taking other positions. We have an awesome benefits package. We have competitive pay. I think in the beginning, I remember everybody going, I hope we all have jobs at the end of this, and that fear and that concern and the uncertainty, and now getting through, I think one of the things ITC has done really well is from day one, communicated with us about anything in the company, meaning we had monthly meetings, weekly meetings to keep us abreast of what decisions were being made and where we were sitting. And I think that helped employees feel comfortable and engaged. And I did obviously know several people. I visit with several people who work full-time, and they're like, we don't know nothing. We don't know what we're doing tomorrow. We don't know if we're supposed to even go into work tomorrow. And so I think that communication piece of just weekly, monthly, sometimes daily touch points with your employees just helped keep us there. So not struggling with a great resignation.
Can I ask a really quick follow-up, a little bit off script, but just kind of like what percentage A and what percentage B? Think about we all got accelerated into remote work, hybrid work because of COVID. But now that we're there, I think if COVID went away tomorrow and was 0% concern, would some remote work and hybrid work presumably would remain more for workforce and workplace reasons. So when you think through where you're at as a company right now, related to the policies, what percentage of it is still trying to be safe, trying to be careful, trying to do what's right related to COVID, and what percentage of it is we have to evolve into the new workplace, and that is why we're hybrid. Is it 100%, 0%? Is it some mix? Maybe we just do kind of a lightning round here, but Patrice, the reason for the remote workers now, more COVID or more, this is the new workplace?
It's definitely more COVID right now. And we have always had some flexibility. There are some jobs that, hey, can I work from home? It's always been on a casual basis, but with the office team, we've always had some flexibility that, you know, people could work remotely if it was advantageous for what they were trying to do. But we definitely have seen a toll on our culture, not seeing people, and that's probably our biggest concern. And so those teams that are not back in the office now are actually anxious to get back. Yeah, so I think we'll have some, but the majority of the reason right now is COVID.
Randy, what about for you?
Well, my opinion is different than Trees, and I hope this is another one that I don't really know, but I think most of our people are home. They enjoy I'd say 60 to 70%, and 40% are still fearful of COVID. So that's my wild guess.
Sydney?
We're still working remotely because of COVID, but when we come back in January or whenever that date is, our hybrid schedule will be for specifically the new work culture and making sure we align with what folks want.
Yeah, because of COVID, we continue to delay our permanent flexible work environment strategy. We'll go to a 20-60-20, so 20% of our colleagues will be in facilities because of roles. 60% will be in some kind of a hybrid capacity, and 20% will work from home. And it's just a matter of stops and starts that we've had to deal with. That's where we'll ultimately get to.
Back on script here, and we touched on this a little bit, but I want to ask this question as it was submitted. Well, a little bit of color in front of it. I came into the office today just before 8 o'clock, and I will likely leave tonight sometime not too long after 5. But is the 8 to 5 work schedule dead or dying? What do you think our normal schedule looks like going forward? Whoever wants to start.
It's probably badly wounded at least. So we're an insurance company, and we kind of have to have people, there, 8 to 4:30, 8 to 5, somewhere like that. So Jason's people can get a hold of us. So there will always be an element of that. But we have a lot more jobs that work at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. or Saturdays, Sundays, or whatever they want. So I don't know what the percentages are, but so you will have a percentage of our staff. They're kind of 8 to 5-ish, for going forward. But we have a lot more positions now that are going to be working some form of life.
It's similar, and because we're in the same industry, we're a broker. He's an insurance company, so we work very close together. Very similar answer. For me, what I talk with our colleagues about is it's really about being present for each other as colleagues and for our clients and our customers. And then it's also making sure that you deliver, you're upholding your end of the bargain. And there's certain colleagues that it is more of an 8 to 5 function. Our receptionists at the front desk, for example. There's a lot of colleagues that they appreciate that flexibility, and as long as there's coverage for the customer and or access for other colleagues from a team perspective, that they're creating their own hours. I'm okay with that, but interestingly, that presents another problem of, as CEO and certain colleagues, I mean, if you're not careful, you can basically work, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, because people are communicating and pushing things along at different hours. So there's some things in that whole element of 8 to 5 no longer existing that are presenting some interesting new complexities that, I'm always up for a good challenge, but it is one of those that can drag down on energy and drag down on culture longer term if we aren't careful and we don't think about how to address it.
If someone has to be available now 20 hours a day to meet the team schedules that they've chosen, that wouldn't,
I've basically been CEO under COVID. I was CEO announced 1/1/20. And I made the mistake, good or bad, to say I'm available from 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And everybody took me up on it. Had to back that up a little bit, as that's just not realistic to be able to provide that level of engagement for, what I thought was 2 weeks. And now we're 20 plus months into
you were
this thing.
available for 2 weeks that time frame. I would say 8 to 5 is not it has become flexible and less strict is kind of what we've said. 8 to 5, we're a business, you know, we serve obviously communities, and so we're gonna have to be available when people are available. But I still think the flexibility and the less strict, rigid, you must be here at 7:45 and not leave until 5:15. We've seen that go.
Anything to add?
I'm not sure we've ever had 8 to 5, and so I would reframe the question into, do you have structured hours? Okay, a lot of our field workers are tied to schedules, appointments. They have to be at customers' homes at certain times. Some of them work a 4-day week, some of them work a 5-day week, you know, but there's a structured schedule around it because of the commitments. The same way for customer care is the customer care center has to be open and we have to have people taking calls. And so those people have structured hours. But again, it's a varied schedule. That makes it work. For most of the office workers, they need to get their job done. And that's kind of always been, and management needs to be there to support their team. I agree with Justin Jason, when we first went home, there were many of us that had difficulty limiting our day. And that really did lead to some exhaustion. And, you know, I've been coming up to my office in Cedar Rapids now more frequently. And I actually feel like, initially I felt like I wasn't working at all, right? Because I was only up here for 9 or so hours, and then I'd lose time driving home. And so finding that right balance so that you're not burning people out, but giving people flexibility, I think that's going to be our challenge in, you know, being more flexible.
So Jason, how'd you rein it in? Because unfortunately, James works with me here, and I was in the lounger last night at home, and I sent out an email kind of on a time-sensitive project after 8 o'clock last night to 4 people. I had a response from all 4 by 8:15, which means we're not doing something right.
You figured that out.
Because I'm sending out emails at 8 o'clock at night, because that's, I was just catching up and looking on my iPad at home, and I sent it up. So the 4 people I sent it to were all looking at their email between 8:15 and 8.
Email comes from where.
True.
That's a fair statement, Randy. I mean, it really does. And I think Larry to at least partially answer the question, but tagging it to say, we're still guilty as charged. What was happening for us was that was happening all throughout the organization. Instead of their senior executive level things that happen after hours that, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's part of what you sign up for running a company. So we've reeled a lot of that back in, but still dealing with it at some of the more senior level of how urgent really is this, or is it just Jason or Larry or Dwayne or whomever pushing it when it could have been saved for Monday morning?
I want to get back to something that Randy mentioned in his opening statement about remote pay. There's really 2 sides of this, and just like to what extent, the question ultimately is going to be, to what extent are you already seeing this? Are you attacking it at all from a policy perspective? But, you know, the negative side of this is that people can live in Cedar Rapids and get paid a lot more money somewhere else. And it's really challenging to compete with that. Randy mentioned the positive side of that is that for the guy who was living in Manhattan, the Cedar Rapids salary was pretty compelling, or the lesser cost of living was pretty compelling, right? So I guess it goes both ways. But have you seen in recruiting, I think this was mostly, right, recruiting new people and talent attraction, have you seen some of this already in play? How are you reacting to it? What do you see going forward in terms of the cost of living imbalances in different places of the country, the salary imbalances in different places of the country, and now these people can live or work in either one of those places. So you've got some things that don't mesh like they used to.
This is a challenging one. It's a real challenging one. For us right now, I heard not all that long ago, don't make permanent decisions to temporary or short-term situations. So we're doing our best to monitor this, address some things in areas, but not panic, not get too carried away with making massive changes that could be problematic to us longer term. So in most of our roles, we've got compensation bands that we can kind of play within or manipulate. And then in certain instances, we're having to address some things on a one-off or a case-by-case basis. You also look at some of the larger tech companies out there, the Googles and the Amazons. You know, one of my cousins, for example, he worked for one of those two companies in San Francisco, got tired of the climate in San Francisco, has moved to Salt Lake City, and they had a compensation adjustment as just part of their protocol that was actually downward versus upward. So again, there's some things that we're kind of monitoring in that longer term perspective and seeing what other best practices might become. But that's how we're handling it for the time being. This is definitely a complicated one if you have a kind of a multinational workforce.
We've not seen this yet. We have hired a few people that will be strictly remote, but they are within our footprint. So this has not been a situation we've been faced with yet.
So kind of a couple different things. Right before the pandemic, we actually hired a chief officer that we couldn't match his salary. And he came here, I think, in January of 2020 before the pandemic. And it was kind of after, the Rockwell Collins acquisition. And for those of us in Cedar Rapids, I mean, there was a ton of gigantic houses that you could get for under $1 million. So he sold his 1,300 square foot house in New Jersey and came here having $1 million to spend. And he was like heaven. I mean, he was touring house after house after house, just couldn't believe it. And I said, well, this is not always this way, but right now it's like big things. Well, then kind of flipped, a few months later, and then we kind of lost that. We lost the ability to have more affordable housing. And so we kind of had to, bite the bullet on a couple salaries because they were going to stay where they were, and they couldn't come to the better, more modest cost of living that we had here. So it's kind of a little bit all over the board, but I kind of look at it like Jason does. Is I think this is going to be 3 to 5 years is still a short-term problem, I think, and I don't think this is going to last forever. I just think people are going to want to get back together again a little bit more. But in the meantime, it has created some challenges kind of on both ends of the continuum.
Almost everyone we have is local. Okay, so we really haven't experienced, having to deal with disparities in salaries. We do regularly reevaluate compensation in positions, and there have been some positions where we've reevaluated and we've done a bump because we felt that the market had shifted on a more permanent basis. I too don't believe you should knee-jerk into any kind of solution because the future's too unclear. And our bigger challenge has been when we're trying to hire and move someone here, the lack of affordable housing in that mid-range has been an obstacle. We've had people, accept positions at the salary, very excited, and then come in to look for housing and said there's just no housing. So didn't really want to move at that time.
As a really quick aside, the regional plan that we're reviewing right now and actively working on right now, one of the really critical questions that we're trying to address is it's clear that things are changing. How on the macro level here, a lot of the work that we do at the Economic Alliance at the macro level of the economy, you come out ahead in a remote worker situation, right? You understand that it can work both ways and that there are advantages both ways. But what can we do as a region from a policy perspective, from a marketing perspective, promotions perspective, to come out more to the good than to the bad is really one of the critical questions that we're working on. So always invite thoughts and feedback offline about any of that stuff, because that's an ongoing conversation. You want to, just picking through the questions here, we won't have time for all of these, and I want to make sure that the audience gets a chance as well. But this is kind of a fun one, and I'll shift gears just a little bit. And I'll ask two different questions. It's kind of the reverse of one another, and choose to answer whichever you want. It's about the workplace, given maybe fewer people in the office, given some of the demands about the workforce that has for the workplace. But also then on the home office side, are you hearing from people that say, well, if I'm working from home, are you buying me a new office chair? Are you upgrading my IMON service so that I've got the highest level of premium service? Is that an employee benefit now, right? So what changes are you seeing because of the changing dynamics in your office space? And what changes related to policy and employee benefits are you engaged in at all related to people being able to effectively work from home? So whoever wants to start.
I can start with that. So we will still continue to be headquartered here out of Cedar Rapids. Our CEOs, you guys have talked a lot today about culture, and I believe our CEO believes we need to be together to really have the culture play out at ITC the way we want it to. We are better together. There's been folks that have said we had a really good 2020 and a really good 2021, but there's a lot of us that get energy from being around people and being together, and we do our best work when we're together. So regardless of the hybrid situation that we will encounter when we go back, whenever that is, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office, Monday and Friday with an optional remote work is here to stay. That's what their hope is. So I do think it will be permanent as long as it goes well, but we will still have a need for an office here in Cedar Rapids.
I can go and ask, we're the same, we have no intention of moving out of Cedar Rapids, and we'll probably have less people here, there's no doubt about that. I can't remember what month it was, but I was working from home, and all of a sudden I got a sore neck, and I started thinking about it. I bet we got people all over that are, ergonomically, because we're an insurance company, we want people to have, elbows at 90-degree angles and all that stuff. So we did offer everyone chairs. I think we paid 75%, they paid 25%, and that went over well. So people had real ergonomic chairs all over the country. So we thought this might not go on forever, but we thought it could go on. If I'm starting to break down, other employees are going to be starting to break down as well too. So, and then getting standing desks, and we have a kind of a system where you come into the home office. There's a big long counter there, and whatever you need, you ask for it. If it's approved, get on there. There's all this equipment every day with people's names on it, and by the end of the day, it's all gone. So, we always intend to have an office. Big believers in being together, but we'll probably also never pack 30 people in a meeting room, in the future either. And I think every meeting there will probably be always remote people, coming in from whatever reason. So, not to overkill the word, but definitely some kind of a hybrid thing going forward.
You just shop local for those chairs.
I'm Vanderbilt here.
I did, yeah.
Oh, I think we did.
All right, just making sure.
I see some people here that are probably here for, we're all going to all go home and come out of a career if that happens.
We're in a growth spurt right now, and so we're actually back to trying to shoehorn people in to the space we have. And so I think having that more flexible work schedule will be part of the office solution. In terms of accommodating people working from home, if you live in IMON footprint, you've always got service. What we did do right when the pandemic started is we pay a stipend for all those people that live outside of IMON's footprint to cover their broadband. Okay, and we have opted to make that a permanent benefit. So every IMON employee has as good a broadband as they could possibly get. We also, as people left, they took their chairs. We provided monitors at home, and we did ask that if one of our team members was, choosing to work from home, that they have a workspace. I know that, they couldn't be working in a congested area and they couldn't be doing childcare at the same time as they were working. So we asked that they have a desk and if they could not accommodate that, then we invited them back to the office with the safety protocols in place. We don't foresee having extra space in the foreseeable future. But those are kind of accommodations. That chair idea is a good idea. Right now, they took their office chairs, so when they come back, they're gonna have to bring them back.
It's similar to the other panelists. We definitely have done everything we can to accommodate our colleagues with stand-up desks, with dual monitors. We're actually, as we trade out our hardware, we're going to laptops for colleagues so that they've got the ability to, plug in, unplug. That also plays into our longer term strategy when we think about our facilities. How can we end up basically creating like slip seating where if you want to move around the building, there's going to be areas where you can just plug in and move around instead of being stuck in your workstation or in your office. So our mantra at True North is people will determine who wins. And I don't get too worked up about a $300 stand-up desk or a office chair. If it's going to help them stay productive and healthy and focused, that's what we need to be doing. And that's really what we've stayed centered on. It's always interesting, some of these conversations though, when we're talking with our HR professionals, because they like more definition and structure. And we're in a state where it's a little more guidelines and frameworks where you have to move around a little bit. So there's some policies that we're working on right now, trying to shore up and find that common ground.
I think when we selected all of you as panelists, we were looking for people
Within
that
walking distance.
it's kind of where this question is leading, but I mean, I think it was accident. I think we were choosing charismatic people that would have something to offer and that would attract a large crowd. But we did wind up with 4 people that have companies downtown and who work downtown and who have significant employment bases downtown. And this is maybe a tough question, but I want to, I'm curious if you feel any sense of responsibility, if it's a factor in any way, shape, or form, a major factor or a minor factor, or it just simply can't be a factor. But the workforces that all of you employ downtown, when they were in the office, drove this downtown. It created coffee shop traffic, and it created restaurants and bars, and it created customers and patrons for businesses. And not having all of those people there has hurt. It has visibly hurt the vibrancy of downtown. I didn't really finish that in a question, but I mean, I guess the question was, is it something that you think about? Is it something that you can factor at all, or you've got to lead where the business leads? And it's just an unfortunate time that it's led to a situation where you have fewer people driving that downtown economy.
One example of something that we did with our different leaders or managers, we'll give them some opportunities for spot bonuses for colleagues, and they might give somebody a $25 Amazon card or a $50 Amazon card. We've just started buying local gift cards to various restaurants, coffee shops, those types of things. It's the same dollar amount, but we're trying to keep the dollars here and try to continue to support some of our local vendors. Ways to also support local and try to get some traffic into our facility is we've got food trucks coming into the parking lot a day or two a week, and we keep a rotation going there. So birthdays, we changed what we give for birthdays to we work with Almost Famous and do kind of a popcorn birthday kit. So our creative team and our HR team has really tried to thread that needle, so to speak, in terms of where can we do things that are meaningful for the colleagues and yet tie some kind of local support to it. And if anybody has other ideas, we're receptive, because that's a real issue. That's a very big concern back back to the long-term game, you know, we've got to figure out how to have Cedar Rapids be a place that people want to live, work, and recreate. And if our downtown is, you know, desolate, it's not very attractive for us to try to bring college kids in from various schools. We're competing against the Chicagos and the Kansas Cities and the Minneapolises or the Scottsdales. And that even is compounded with trying to recruit executives all the time. So it's a responsibility, and it's very important.
While I don't necessarily know that we've acted upon anything, it has been the topic of conversation in multiple strategy meetings about where have we been? Where are we at? I drive by the ITC building every Sunday on my way home from church, and my kid, we just wave at the building, and we recognize that we're gone, and that foot traffic down here has been minimal. I'm writing down your ideas because those are really, really good. You know, our president's located in the Des Moines office. We have a Des Moines office, our Cedar Rapids corporate office. We have an Albert Lee office, and then we have some satellite offices as well. So there's a lot to consider, but it has definitely been on our minds.
Cedar Rapids is hugely important to us. I think weekly about the Blue Strawberry, going out of business. I don't know if that's temporary or permanent, because of our location. Probably if you walked in there, 8 out of 10 people were from UFG Insurance, and so that bothers us a lot. We're a publicly traded company, and we always have to have kind of a plan if someone ever wants to come and buy us. And we have a factor. If a foreign company wanted to buy us, they would keep everything intact. They would be able to pay much less than a company, say from Wisconsin, that would close down our home office here. So that's hugely important that even our board would not entertain a much larger offer if someone thought that Cedar Rapids would be in jeopardy. So it's hugely important, and we realize that. In some ways, I'm not sure what we can do about it, but we will always, as time goes on, we've got a lot of ideas to try to encourage people to come back to the office. We want to offer the flexibility, so we can accommodate the people that want that, but we're going to have a lot more incentives to try to get people back to the office, at least to some extent in the near future, whether that be next year or the year after that.
Cedar Rapids is very, very important to us. And when we did have to move out of the Great America building, we very deliberately chose to stay in Cedar Rapids. In terms of supporting businesses, it's gone hand in hand with what we've done to support employees. Almost from the beginning in May, we typically have a Cinco de Mayo festival. We did it drive-by. Okay, and instead of a lunch, we bought dinner for the families. So it gave management an opportunity to see everybody's face, even though it was through a car. But, and we did many of those. We did a summer picnic that way. We did we have a tradition of a Thanksgiving potluck lunch, which is probably the most important event for our Imon family. We've done that drive-by, and we've always used local restaurants to provide the foods for us. On 4th of July, we had a picnic in the parking lot, social distance, and we had that catered by local. We also do the popcorn for birthdays. Our HR department sends out popcorn for each of the birthdays, and every time we've tried to do something with the employees, it both is to support the local economy, but it is also to support our family. And we've actually had a lot of fun doing it, coming up with creative ways to get just a little bit of personal touch. So we've done it.
Our HR department wants to take taxes out of gift cards, which takes a lot of the fun out.
HR.
I appreciate the recognition that you all have that you make an impact, and make a difference on what's going on. So I do appreciate that. I get in trouble if I go too far off script. But I also wanted to just say thank you for for keeping your headquarters in Cedar Rapids. Maybe for another day, we can do a whole program on the impact that has, and what we as a community and a region lose when we lose headquartered businesses, and just how unbelievably important and significant that is. And again, that was a little accidental here today, but thanks for each one of your companies for having the core in Cedar Rapids that you do. Back on script. I was only off for 30 seconds. And this will be my last question, and then we'll open it up. So get ready with your questions here. But I'm curious, and a good question that was submitted to us about the evolution of the workforce as we go forward. In your industry, do you see automation or artificial intelligence replacing significant portions of your workforce? As you think 5 years into the future, what kind of impact on the work that you do will you see from automation and AI? And maybe has the last couple of years accelerated any of that? Anybody want to start with that?
I'll start with that. We see automation as paramount in our ability to grow. Okay, we can't hire enough people. And so we've really spent the last 3 years looking at everything that we do and say, okay, how much of it can be automated and how much of it has to be handled manually. Okay, obviously you have to install in person, you have to have somebody there. And so we want to invest and our dollars towards employees in the place that will have the biggest impact on our customers, and then automate everything we can on the back end. And so we think that's a really key part of our ability to grow, is to continue to automate that. It is replacing roles today, but not replacing team members. You know, they'll just shift to a different responsibility. And we think that's important.
So, being in the insurance business, you probably have all heard of obviously Progressive, and there are other startup companies where you can go get your auto insurance without ever seeing Jason or paying him commission. And so, where is that going to go? We're completely a commercialized insurance company, and we believe that most of our business will continue to want to go through an agent like Jason. It's complicated enough that you need an advisor to help you through the process to shop the number of companies to do that. So we're investing a lot in automation, to handle maybe the smaller amounts of business that won't necessarily go direct, but they might come and get a quote off of our website. And then if they find something they like, then they might go see Jason, one of his colleagues. But it's kind of hard to figure out where that line is going to go and when it's going to be. That's going to happen. So we're investing a lot in automation, and especially in analytics. Probably 5 years ago, if an underwriter was going to write your auto insurance, they'd look at your driving record and see what it looked like, and probably look at what kind of car you drove, whether it be a Volkswagen or Ferrari, and charge you accordingly. So now we can put in like 150 factors, including the number of bike trails in the areas where you drive the most, can move your loss ratio 0.5%. And all those 150 things combined, and the machine learns which more of those characteristics. And so the underwriter now has, these are tools. So I don't think we're going to replace a lot of underwriters, but the underwriters will just be a lot smarter and more capable. So bad story about the insurance industry. 1970. The expense ratio part of the business was right at about 30%. And now, flash forward 40 some years, we've invested billions and billions of dollars in automation, and our industry expense ratio is 30%. So when I first started, I thought by now, I'd be working only 1 day a week. Computer would do all the rest of the stuff, but it hasn't been that way. It gets back to humans tended to be much more important than we ever thought. So.
We do not see AI playing a significant role in our industry, not replacing significant portions of our workforce at all. We intend to keep building power lines with people, so no, we don't see it.
Automation for us, what's interesting is we have a fair amount of our population, especially in processing type functions, that's where we have higher turnover and there's just less workforce tolerance for it. So for us, that automation exists in those spaces where we have high turnover, where we are having troubles filling jobs, or people just don't want to do the work. And then the other area for automation is, to Randy's point, a little different wrapper, but how do we enhance the client experience? I like to talk about the bionic company of creating that interface between human and technology so we can create world-class client experiences. So it's definitely in the financial services, insurance space. There's a lot going on in technology and in automation and AI.
All right, I've taken my hour. There's a hand ready to go. Let's do it.
I want to kiss the elephant in the room, specifically as a United States Marine Corps veteran. COVID brought us together, and sometimes when you work away from your family, older parent, Alzheimer's, dementia, can't fix what you won't face. It's what Oprah tells us on Chicago daily. And I say that capitalize it. Mental health, in the last month, you've had 3 under 18 to kill their parents or kill someone. So if you're not focusing on mental health as for the whole, because unfortunately during COVID, immediate losses that people have to bring back into the workplace or where they work. So I apologize because I got here a little late and I've already discussed it and I apologize. But again, for me as a Marine Corps veteran, I can't run away from the fact that most of us, that Iowa Nice thing, we don't get a checkup from the neck up. And again, you can't fix what you won't face. So where's the mental health plans? Because I haven't heard anything since I sat down. And the daily news here, things I never thought I'd hear in Iowa news, is infiltrated, and that directly reflects back to mental health.
Great question and not yet addressed. So who wants to tackle that first?
I can start with this one. It is a good question. It does tend to be kind of an elephant in the room. So during this COVID period, we have about 1,100 employees. We've had 3 suicides in that group and a couple of really senior people. I don't think it was caused by COVID, but it's another straw on the camel's back. And so we've actually started having corporate in-person meetings. And in the category of something I never thought I would do, I have talked about what services we have available to employees every single time. And I will continue to do that, probably for all of time. But we offer a lot of services, but just get people to get the help. Of the 3 people that took their own life, really only one had been seeking any treatment, and we have a lot of things available. From to teledocs to EAP to obviously psychiatric services are covered. But it's just as you said, it's what's the above the neck saying?
Check up from the neck up.
I have to remember that one. But it's it's reluctance to all over to talk about it. And as a CEO, about all I can do is tell people I've had issues before. I went to see people before. It's okay to get help, but the key is to get help, because you're right. There's just whatever stress there was in the past. There's about 4 more things piled on, especially if you're trying to educate your children at home. Wrestling with whatever broadband you have at home. You got everybody at home. You're unable to travel. It's just I had it pretty easy through all of this. I had a couple kids that came back in my basement a short period of time, but for the most part, it was just me and my wife. But some people are really going through some really tough times right now.
Others.
Okay, mental health is a topic we have openly discussed since the pandemic because of the isolation. In some groups, we have a lot of employees who are single, And all of a sudden, they were working and eating and sleeping and everything by themselves. And so they lost their support system. And we definitely saw the stress in it. One of our core values is really supporting our colleagues and supporting each other. And, so all of the management team has been really trained. In fact, they're going through training again next week on how to identify signs of stress and then how to engage in conversation. We too have employee assistance programs, and we've had more people avail themselves to that this year than over the last 21 months than we have ever before. It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Thank you for saying that.
And you have to watch for it. Sometimes people don't even realize they're under stress, or they're feeling it because it manifests itself in poor performance or orneriness or things that are uncharacteristic. And so, our conversation around it has always been, okay, what's causing that change in performance? Okay, what else is going on? And that's really helped us. I can think of a number of employees that it was such a big sigh of relief to realize the company was going to support them instead of fire them, and help them make sure they knew, because you don't think about employee assistance of programs when you don't need it, right? Otherwise, it's just in the manual somewhere. We have also have done a lot of our activities to bring people together, because we found that just a little bit of social interaction makes a big deal. And whether it's online bingo or, pizza in a park, or just that little social interaction helps a great deal. I've stolen an idea from James, and that we'll be rolling out the app Calm to employees as another stress reduction tool. But I think the most important thing is my constantly asking my direct reports, how's your team doing? How is Denise doing? Denise had this happen. How are we doing? And I think at the moment, that's what we've got to work with. But it has to be out on the table, and you have to be constantly asking, and constantly listening. It's a lot harder to pick it up through a Teams meeting than it is when you're standing in front of someone. But it is a real thing, and it has taken a toll.
Thank you. Anything additional to add? We don't all have to chime in on every one, but Jason.
One thing to add that we've done is we implemented a VTO policy first of this year, where we give every colleague 40 hours a year of volunteer time off. And data shows or research shows that when people are volunteering, that gives them a sense of purpose, gives them a sense of meaning. And so that was, I agree with a lot of what Randy and Patricia said, but that's just another thing that we've done to try. Thank you for bringing it up. It's a very, very important topic. And it's just,
Doesn't it need to move from Iowa nice to Iowa nosy?
yeah. There's a reality check element to it.
Right. I just one comment. I've made this comment, heard this comment several times throughout the pandemic, but COVID has not been everyone's crisis. And I think that the mental health part of that culprit, or COVID may have been the culprit of it, but it caused some mental health issues more than we probably obviously have ever seen to rise up. And so our CEO, it started with day one, that being a topic that came into discussions, and has still plays a very big part of our meetings.
Quick shout out to the Make It Okay campaign
Yeah.
that's going on locally. I see a bunch of nods around the room. I know Lori Y was at Downtown Rotary just yesterday talking about that, but it's another way that you can try to bring that into the corporate workspace where it maybe wasn't a traditional the topic there. What other questions can we take from the audience? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question regarding employee culture in regard, like when you have people working remote, in person, like how do you captivate that culture with, you have so many different audience?
Yeah, just want to tackle that, and I don't know if this is the same question or just I'm expanding on it, but I wanted to circle back around to the fact that you've got line workers, you've got field staff, there's some people that never had the opportunity to go to remote. And you deal with different cultural issues, workplace cultural issues between different categories of employees. Is there envy among employees for those that did have the opportunity to work remote, or maybe the opposite way
In the
around?
beginning, maybe there was a little envy in the beginning, but after a while, maybe not.
But
So
the
we-
workplace culture question.
Yeah,
thank you for
so-
that question.
I'll start with that. So we've had, I mentioned this already, but we've got bi-weekly and then monthly all employee meetings with our CEO. So all 700 people coming together multiple times throughout the last 2 years. Weekly team meetings with our department, twice a month meetings with my own team. We would have your virtual happy hours and game nights and things like that throughout the different holidays. So I think ITC's been very strategic in making sure we stay engaged with folks working at home. And we've always had meetings, but, there's been a couple of times throughout this year where I noticed myself engaging with someone maybe at an in-person meeting, and I've said, oh my gosh, how long has it been since I've seen you? So we realized that, but I think very early on, the touch points that were scheduled, even if they are virtual, I think made us really feel like we knew what we were doing and we had a game plan. So they were very diligent about making sure those were scheduled. And to answer the question about the field crews and the office staff, I guess what I will say to that as an employee who works with our field crews quite often, it was definitely a concern of mine in the beginning is, how is everybody gonna look at this? What kind of comments am I gonna get made to me as I go meet with them out in the field? Are they gonna ask me how my little home office is doing and, maybe give me a little grief? But while there's been some maybe fun banter back and forth, we have maintained really great relationships with our field crews. Obviously, they had different protocols put in place for them, but they understand the importance of the work that they do and they need to be out there. And they understand the relativeness of our work. So I really think we've maintained a very, very good camaraderie between the two.
Others, Patrice.
I think we've said a lot of things. We've done a couple mailings to all employees just with some UFG swag, a message just to make sure people don't think they're forgotten. We have, like claims adjusters, risk control people, they are remote workers all the way. So the people that take those jobs kind of anticipate that they know what the life they have. When the pandemic first came, then they could join meetings that they were actually never able to. So they actually had kind of a reverse thing of, hey, I'm sitting at home now and I can get in on some meetings with underwriters, in-office claims adjusters and things like that. It was kind of awesome. So some of those things I don't think will ever go away. We also do town halls that all the employees can call into and ask me, stump the CEO, which they do often. And those will probably never go away now. I mean, we got enough positive thoughts out of that. We'll probably do those all the time.
Yeah, I would just add, this probably isn't going to be a newsflash to anyone, but we live in an environment or a world today that there's a lot of divisive undertone. And so I'm always looking for, what are we for? What can we find common ground on? And so within True North, kind of dumb luck, but I launched the movement, our cultural movement in 2019. It's called One True North. And it's about clients, colleagues, and communities. The clients fuel us. The colleagues are, our number one asset. We want to stay reinvested in our communities. Then we break it into the 3 Ps of purpose, place, and performance. Then we talk a lot about connection generates power. And so having those touchstones, I would urge every organizational leader to think about this as it pertains to how are you building connection? How are you creating an environment of what are we for as compared to what are we against? And so that's been huge for us, that to just keep building on all these various touch points that we're trying to instill in our environments every day.
Jason sounded related to Dwayne Smith there, didn't he?
We're pretty close.
Any other thoughts on that? That was a great question. It's certainly one that people wrestle with a lot.
So I'd like one, if the OSHA standards go in place, is it the employee's responsibility to pay for the testing and submit it, or is it the employer's responsibility?
Question, I probably vote employee.
Yeah, I would probably vote employee as well.
Still grappling with that one. You know, our workforce is, we've done some polling and still kind of rolling up the sleeves on exactly where we're gonna go with, what are we paying for versus what moves to the employee.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, how did the pandemic affect your salaries, employee salaries, pensions and benefits? And with new Delta variant and cases rising, are you all in plan of another lockdown?
So pandemic for us, you know, March 13th, that Friday or that Monday, we went on record immediately, really having no idea exactly what things looked like, but we said, you know, colleague health and safety is number one, and your security is right there too. So no changes in salaries, benefits, no freezes, nothing. We do our cost of living increases reviews first quarter. We passed all those through, again, living in an environment where we weren't exactly clear, but I'm thinking long term, and people are a number one asset, so we stayed invested there. No, I really don't foresee us in a situation where we would go full-fledged lockdown, everybody out of the office. I think Randy said it earlier. We're going to see variants that continue to emerge, and I think there's an element of learning to live with some version of what COVID is. Part of it's the optimist in me, but I really genuinely, we would say with confidence, I don't foresee us shutting our office facilities down like we did in March of 20.
I would say same. We did have a brief hiring freeze at ITC for just a month or two. Can't really remember specifically how long it was, but that was it. The rest, very similar. Everybody felt very, very secure going into the lockdown and the remote work that we all had we were all very stable in our positions. So, and that's what was communicated to us. So it was great.
Same in every way, shape and form. We actually are giving out a bit bigger raises in 2022, probably back to that, you know, great resignation thing, and kind of asked, you know, our managers to use this extra amount to especially protect the people that you really don't want to lose. So.
We were in the same boat. I was fortunate to be able to say on March 13th or 14th that no one had to worry about their jobs, that, you know, they would be employed whatever happened. We're an essential worker category, being in telecommunications. And so employees knew from the very beginning their jobs were protected. And we did our routine raises like we have always done. We also do the first quarter, and, you know, it's been kind of from a salary kind of business as usual. I did bonus last year, all employees, because there were a number of our team members had spouses who lost their jobs, and there was plenty of other things to worry about. And so I did not want any of our team worrying about their personal finance. So I did bonus to help people through that hump until it kind of settled down.
And just to put a bow on that, I think to the collective points, you know, those are the things from an executive standpoint, you have to kind of take a deep breath on and hope that that carries you through when you're in the great resignation climate, right? You know, you're making these investments, you're making these deposits in your colleagues with the somewhat hope and trust that it's not gonna be all for naught, so to speak.
Although it was unanimous on this panel, I would say that from intel from 1,200 members, there was a lot of companies that did pay cuts, certainly in the spring and the summer of 2020. So you guys are unanimous here, but I think you were in the minority probably overall. And now, wage inflation is definitely is very real now as we look out over 1,200 members of the Economic Alliance. That's certainly what we're hearing. So you got time for either two quick ones or one long one. So is yours quick or long? Depends on them, right? So go ahead.
Well, shortly after, several months after the pandemic started, we were hearing a lot of talk about productivity, and everybody thought productivity, was doing just fine or even going up. And I know crisis situations like the flood, I know a lot of people said, people really rallied. So I'm curious, number one is if productivity is continuing to stay high. And two, have you felt any pinch with innovation, or is it too soon to tell? Like, is the innovations going to suffer because you don't have everybody or less people in the office and meeting together, things like that?
Great question. So impacts on productivity and innovation.
I'll start with that. I would say that productivity was impacted. Some teams had more trouble than other teams. Okay, and there are definitely some of our teams that working remote, their productivity declined. That they needed to be in that collegiate environment and that support environment to really make it work. And I do think we have all agreed it's really hard to brainstorm on teams. Okay, you can do a lot through remote work tools, but to actually brainstorm and create, we have learned that we really need a whiteboard. Okay, and we need people to be able to walk around and bounce ideas. And, all of us by now have either been on Zoom meetings or Teams, and it's so hard to have a conversation because you end up stepping on each other because you can't figure out who's going to talk next. And so in terms of innovation and creativity, if we have a problem to solve, or if we have, some kind of plan we want to put together, it's best done in the office. Even if we have to stay 6 feet apart at some times, but we have found that some things just don't work effectively remotely.
So our productivity is actually went up some, and kind of went, like Teresa said, it went down at first, when everyone just trying to get it figured out. Then it kind of went up above normal levels and then kind of settled back, but still at a higher level than we've done in the past. Kind of to the point where we actually have not replaced some people that have retired or done, so which is kind of a plus. We're converting our IT platform to Agile, and I won't get into that because basically I don't know what it's all about. But that I was warned would be 2 steps back and 3 steps forward. We did the 2 steps back, and I think we're up to 2 steps forward, and there are going to be more output from that format as well. So. And I know that we've hired some Scrum Masters, which I never thought.
So my president, Dusky Terry, and I visited about this because I had initially thought maybe he should be sitting up here instead of me. So he went over some of these answers with me, and just specifically to your question, he said prior to the pandemic, the business community's primary concern with working remotely was a loss of overall productivity if employees are not in the office, in their chairs, doing their work. ITC proved that's not the case, and we had a very productive 2020 and 2021. And I do think it, this would be my own opinion, but I do think it surprised a lot of people how productive we were, and a lot of places were, so.
Yeah, I'm tracking, for us, productivity is really about the same. To Patrice's point, we've had some teams where there's been some downfall, and some teams where they've really elevated. The innovation one is an interesting part that I'm keeping an eye on. We're a relatively young company. We're 20 years old. We do not suffer from entrepreneurial ideas. It's picking the right ones. So that one, I think for us, we'll be curious to see how things play out maybe in 24 to 36 months of are we placing our bets in the right areas as ideas or innovations are coming through the doors.
One corollary there, and just a minute or two left here, but I have heard, and I think we've seen some of that too with the people that we work most closely with, that answer on productivity and innovation and really adaptation to remote work is different depending on, have you been here and part of the culture for 10 years? Are you brand new, right? And I know that's a common theme as well. We didn't get to it today, but maybe just a thought or two. It's been really challenging to train and onboard brand new people that never had the in-person office experience. If you got hired in the latter half of 2020 or in 2021, that's sort of a whole different class of issue. So.
We have found that to be very true. Initially, we thought, because we have such a strong culture, moving to remote, things worked pretty well initially, but now, we brought on 30 people who've never been in the office consistently, and it's a concern. It's a concern on, because culture is what you make it. And we're having to use different ways to connect people. But I think that's part of why we're anxious to get back to the office, because we have 30 people who don't really know what it feels like to be part of IWON.
Final thoughts?
There's several people I haven't met that I work with now. I
Yeah.
think that's,
Isn't that interesting?
and I remember the worst thing I did was I did meet one for the first time this summer. And I saw her and I said, oh my gosh, Jennifer, I didn't know how tall you were. And she's really short. And she just went like this. And I said, no, this is just so much of what we don't see when we're in a Teams meeting, but gave me something to think about, maybe not reference their height as soon as I see that.
One of the things we're doing right now is, one of our original 6 founders who's retired, I've got a special project for him where he's capturing the heritage of True North, and we're creating these 4 or 5 minute video snippets with kind of a 1-page overview and then some collective IQ opportunities, so that when you come to True North, maybe you're engaging virtually or some kind of a hybrid. There's a way to capture the heritage and the history of True North going forward, because it's all too easy to lose that as we're operating in this different environment, whatever new normal does become.
Great insights throughout today. I appreciate everybody that took the time to come here today. It's so good to see all of you. Jason, Sydney, Randy, Patrice, it's great to see you, and thanks so much for your participation today.
I know.
Oh, okay. Well, I never-
Absolutely, thank you.
Hey, guys.